Thank you, Acting Speaker. I rise today to contribute to the Change or Suppression Conversion Practices Prohibition Bill 2020. And I want to thank the Attorney-General and her office for once again bringing legislation into this House that continues to make Victoria a more fair and equitable state for all citizens. During my short time as the member for Melton, I've been truly touched by the many individuals, families and organisations that have sought me out to discuss with me their concerns around their experiences as LGBTIQ or supporting their loved ones. It still seems astonishing to me that so many people reach out to me and a stranger in their lives to raise with me their experiences and concerns to seek assistance. In 2020, we should not have to give 1 second of a thought about anyone's identity or sexuality. People are who they are. It shouldn't need justification or explanation. The need of so many of the individuals who reach out to me is an unfortunate testament that the LGBTIQ community still experiences unnecessary hurt and pain. All too frequently, that hurt and pain comes from those who should be caring and loving for them. Young people in particular are at risk of severe mental and physical harm as they develop through their formative years. It is a tragedy that often those whom are closest to them are those causing that harm. It may be through good intentions, however, the pain and damage that can be caused is long-term. We know all too well that the LGBTIQ community suffer higher levels of mental health concerns. The National LGBTIQ Health Alliance reports that LGBTIQ young people are 5 times more likely to attempt suicide than their peers. Transgender people are 11 times more likely to attempt suicide. It is a tragedy. Almost 50% of trans and gender diverse youth have attempted suicide. Also, a study in the US indicates that suicide attempts for LGBTIQ individuals is higher again if they are members of a faith community. In particular, some faith practices have felt the need to fix something that isn't broken. The risk to the LGBTIQ community in particular is high. A young person in their formative year often has no choice in where they live and how their family spends their time or what faith community they belong to. Sadly, to reject a faith community or their teachings might come with consequences, financially, physically and mentally. Sometimes an individual might not want to be involved with a faith community. Sometimes they desperately do. A basic human instinct is to be wanted and accepted, to find a place to belong. Faith communities can be a social and cultural connection for people, just as much as a belief system. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge many faith communities and groups that have reached out to me in support of this bill. There are many welcoming and accepting faith communities ministering in an accepting and compassionate way. I would like to acknowledge and thank the 10 multi-faith, multicultural LGBTIQ individuals who wrote to me in support of this bill. And I'm sure everyone in this House received their letter. I'd like to read to you, with their permission, some extracts from their letter. I think it's important to do so. Many of our own have suffered in silence, unable to speak for fear of bringing shame to their families and communities, and still live with the life trauma and dislocation caused by people who believe them to be sick, diseased, and in need of fixing, curing or changing. We have heard and documented the accounts of people who have been taken to doctors and religious leaders to be cured, parents who have pulled their children out of school and taken them to places of worship or even overseas in search of change. Religious leaders of different faiths that have told us that homosexuality is a disease needing a cure and that it is not Indigenous to our communities and cultures. They have told us that they would refer people to appropriate medical organisations to deal with their problem and that they have had repeated contact with people whose desires they have tried to change or suppress. Community and welfare workers have reported to us families that have attempted to fix such problems within their families. And we've heard community leaders espouse violence, understood as the controlling of someone's life as a way for correction. And it goes on. But we have also heard accounts of people who have walked into mosque after coming out to sheikhs and Christian leaders who have opened their church doors to gays and lesbians, despite the personal repercussions to themselves. It is beyond time for this senseless damage to people to stop. We need laws that build understanding through processes that bring people and communities together. This bill overwhelmingly does that, criminalising the most egregious forms of conversion practices that cause injury while providing pathways for voluntary facilitation and investigations when conduct is serious or symptomatic. This bill provides an important foundation towards building understanding for LGBTIQ people from multicultural backgrounds with others within their communities, and sends an important message in protecting people from harm. It affirms that all people should be free to belong as members of their faith and multicultural communities and as Victorians. I also received a letter from Switchboard. Switchboard Victoria is an LGBTIQ community-controlled organisation that has been supporting the mental health of Victorians since 1991, and I dare say every other member received their letter. And CEO John Ball wrote, "Every day in our services at Switchboard, we talk to LGBTIQ Victorians who are struggling. Regularly, we hear about the effects when an individual is rejected by their family, community or faith. We know that supportive families and communities will drive down the suicide and family violence rates for LGBTIQ individuals, something that I know you are committed to addressing. At Switchboard, we know that many LGBTIQ individuals are practising people of faith, and every day we talk to people in our services who want to find affirming churches and places of worship. We are pleased to say that every year we are hearing about more and more religious denominations, faiths and places of worship that have become safe and inclusive places for the LGBTIQ community. Conversion practices are only supported by a tiny but vociferous fraction of religious people in Victoria and by no LGBTIQ organisation or leaders." I'd like to thank all those who wrote to me in support of this bill. Victoria is an accepting and progressive state. This bill continues to send the message to everyone that there is nothing broken about LGBTIQ individuals that needs to be fixed. Practices that place Victorians in danger trying to convert or suppress their fundamental nature is not acceptable and needs to cease. I have, of course, received a number of correspondences from those against this bill. I do not wish to dwell too much on this, but would like to make the following points. Much of their correspondence only has confirmed to me the need for this bill. Many of the writers expressed to me that they should be permitted to manage these issues in their communities. I say to these writers, we are their community too. To any person struggling or in the LGBTIQ community, we are your community too. You are loved and we accept you. Victoria has no place for these practices and no place for discrimination. This bill recognises that change or suppression practices are false, deceptive and are seriously harmful acts. This bill quite rightly aims to eliminate change or suppression practices in Victoria. The bill aims to clearly communicate that change or suppression practices are not tolerated or supported by the Victorian community in any form. Change or suppression practices do not work. It does not include supportive medical and psychological treatment that is in line with professional standards. It has no basis in medical or psychological principles. It is counterproductive, starting from a false start that there is something that is broken that needs to be fixed. There is nothing broken about someone's sexual orientation or gender identity. All that these practices do is lead to broken individuals, harmed by the communities and practices that claim to want to help them. A minister of religion in my constituency mentioned to me, we are all made in the image of God. To seek to convert another's identity is to seek to suppress God in the other. I understand that in the consultation of this bill, many survivors of harmful conversion practices contributed to this bill. I would like to thank them and their work to ensure that these harmful practices are consigned to history. I also would like to thank the many organisations that support LGBTIQ people and congratulate the many faith communities that have been inclusive and supportive of all Victorians. I wholeheartedly support this bill and I commend the bill to the House.